This episode is sponsored by KAS Academics. Find private tutoring and online courses, including a free one that I did about mastering LinkedIn, on kasacademics.com. Welcome back to another episode of The Student Space. In this episode, I'm chatting to Sabine, who has completed a Bachelor of Arts and then the Juris Doctor at Melbourne Law School. We chat all about her experience studying law, clerkships, and the next steps to becoming a lawyer. Enjoy! I'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians on this land on which this podcast is recorded on. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be listening to this podcast. Welcome, Sabine, to an episode of The Student Space. Just start off by telling us who you are and what you wanted to be when you were younger.
Hello, Mia. Thanks for having me. So I'm Sabine. I am a recent graduate of the Juris Doctor at Melbourne Law School at the University of Melbourne. When I was younger, I was thinking about this before I had a few sort of professions that kind of missed me. Like I wanted to be a vet for a while because I loved animals so much, but then wasn't really interested in science. So that one sailed pretty quickly. And then for a long time, I wanted to be like a writer or a journalist, anything where I could sort of express myself in a creative way. And I think that's definitely still a passion of mine and something that I hope to incorporate in the career that I build.
Awesome. I think a lot of students, or even when we're younger, when we're growing up with our own like pets, we all want to be a vet at one stage.
Of course.
And so let's reflect back to your high school days. Tell me a little bit about your high school experience. And I do understand that you completed some of your high school overseas.
Yeah, I did. So I went to uni high in Melbourne for the first part of my high school days, so up until the end of year 10. And then I was lucky enough to move overseas to China, a place called Guangzhou. And I went to an international school for just 2.5 years to finish my schooling. And at my school there, I was doing IB, so I obviously didn't have much of a choice of whether I was going to be doing VCE or anything like that. But yeah, when I got there, I did IB, which in the end I think was pretty good for me because with IB you have to choose a range of subjects from all different kinds of areas like math, science, humanities. Whereas in VCE, I think if I stayed in Melbourne, I probably would have chosen subjects that were more aligned to my interests at the time, but maybe would have meant that my sort of final year 11 and 12 weren't as broad as they ended up being.
Totally fair enough. And so, if you can think back to when you were choosing preferences at the end of your high schooling, what was your aspiration or what did you want to do when you finished school?
Yeah, so I think when I finished school, I had a really strong kind of interest in English. So with IB, you kind of go through and you get it's a 2-year course. So you at the end of your 2 years, you get assessed on the entire two years worth of content. So it's quite a lot. And I had a really great English teacher in year 11 and 12, and he was really encouraging, a person who just really helped me understand my passion for literature and also creative writing. And I had consistently received really quite good grades in English in high school. But when I did my final exams in IB, I ended up actually getting a score of 4, which isn't necessarily bad, but I'd been predicted scores of 7 kind of throughout my entire 2 years. So that was really quite shocking to me at the time. And one really great thing about IB, though, is that you can actually request that your scores be reassessed if you are kind of, yeah, if you're kind of on the cusp of going to the next like level. So the 5, for example, for me. Anyway, so I asked my English score to be reassessed, and it was reassessed, and it did go up. So I ended up with a 5. But it just kind of goes to show that my expectations going in were that I was going to do really well at English, and then didn't perhaps the assessment and the way that it was assessed wasn't necessarily matched to my strengths. But And I didn't let that phase me. I still knew that it was my favorite sort of subject in high school, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point in terms of my career yet. So I thought, well, it's a good idea for me to maybe do an arts degree where I can still incorporate that English sort of literature focus. And then, so that was probably my main priority. And then I thought when I was deciding sort of what area I wanted to go into, I do have language skills. So when I was in China, I learned Chinese and I also speak German. So I thought it would be good for me to have a chance to major in one of those languages, to just basically build my skills and sort of have become a little bit more proficient in one of those languages.
That's incredible. And so you wanted to do arts, but was the plan to come back to Australia? And why Melbourne Uni?
Yeah, so I always wanted to come back to Australia. A lot of my friends at an international school, obviously, we all kind of go in different ways, and a lot of my friends went to the States or other parts of the world, UK, Korea. But for me, I kind of thought I really had a sort of a family tie to Melbourne Uni. So my brothers had gone there, my mum had gone there, and I think I just knew it was a good uni, and it was going to be a good chance for me to come back and sort of build up the start of my career back in Melbourne. And like I said, I really really wanted to go to Melbourne Uni, but when going back to the IB scores that I got, my sort of overall score at that time was quite competitive to get into arts, and I kind of thought, oh my god, I don't think my score is going to be good enough to get in. So I really had to consider other unis. I spent a lot of time considering the arts at Monash as well, and I think for a while I also entertained doing a double degree at Monash. And I went to the open days there, and I really kind of thought they had lots to offer, and I thought it was going to be a good degree if I didn't get my first preference at Melbourne Uni. But in the end, I obviously did get into Melbourne Uni, so it ended up being okay. But I think, I would have equally just been as happy at sort of Monash. I suppose Melbourne Uni was just where I thought I always would go. That's why I went there.
Totally fair enough. And so, what was the arts course like in the first year? So, how many contact hours were you there? What was the structure like?
Yeah. So I think with arts, the contact hours are pretty good. Like I was doing standard 4 subjects in the semester, and I was probably um, there for a couple of hours, maybe 4 hours per subject per week. So somewhere between 12 and 15 hours per week, probably, I would say. Um, and I think overall, one thing that they seem to say to you when you go to your open days and choose the degree you're doing is that you first year is the kind of year where you can pick whatever you want to do and then see what you like and then go ahead and choose your major from there. And that is true to an extent, but one thing I wish someone had told me at the start is that it's not really as easy as they make it seem to change a major, for example. So in my first semester, I did an English lit subject, I did a creative writing subject, I did German, and I did a breadth subject, so a subject outside of my arts degree, which was a law subject. And then I kind of thought, yeah, German's pretty good, but I think I should probably do Chinese as my major. So I had to ask a lot of people to sort of get myself in a Chinese class because I hadn't started with Chinese. So then I had to go and basically get that go to the next Chinese class, and in the end, it sort of messed my credits up a little bit because you have to meet all these requirements as you go through your degree in order to major in a particular subject. So because I hadn't taken that kind of first Chinese class, I was already down a little bit of points there. It ended up working out okay, and the uni was quite supportive in that change. But I just sort of thought I probably went in there thinking, oh, it doesn't really matter. Like I'll just try a couple of different subjects in my first semester and then I'll figure out which majors I'm going to do later. But because I did do a double major, you do have to meet the requirements of both majors and there's less room to do just random electives. So I think that's something to think about if you are thinking about doing a double major. If you're thinking about just doing one major, then I think it's fine. You have a lot more room to just choose a couple of different electives from maybe different majors, and then decide in your second year. But I wish someone had told me that at the start because it was a little bit painful to fix that up.
And that's actually some good advice as well for anyone listening and thinking, oh, I know that there are so many options for majors and I don't know how to decide. It's just as easy as like going to Stop One or like the
Yeah.
Uni Help center and being like,
Exactly.
hey, what should I do? How should I decide? Or
Yeah.
what will like my structure look like?
Yeah, and I think Stop One are really good, and I think that they've gotten better and better over the years. So I definitely recommend just having that chat, and just it's always good to just get an idea. And even if you don't follow the advice they give you or the structure they set out for you, I think that's a really good idea. And I certainly use that. The equivalent basically in my law degree. I certainly went and had a chat about my course structure just so I could really think about what my options were going to be and what it would look like if I made one decision compared to another.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you did mention some like breadth, which is like a fun electives outside of arts, and you did a law subject. Tell me about that, and then also tell me if you did any other random subjects as part of your arts degree.
Yeah, so at Melbourne Uni, at least when I was doing my undergrad, I you had to do four breadth subjects. So I did some really great ones. I did the Principles of Business Law was my first elective, and at that point I didn't know I wanted to be a lawyer. So I'm struggling to remember. God knows why I chose that subject. But nonetheless, I loved it. Like it ended up being a really great subject, and I made some really good friends in that class, and that really sort of sparked my interest in the law. And then another great subject that I did that was another breadth subject as well, also related to law, which absolutely catapulted me into wanting to do a law degree, was called Public Trials. And that was a subject about really famous cases in history that have kind of changed either the law in a serious way or the kind of social effects of that case. So, for example, I wrote my essay about this case that was uh, really famous in the UK about two or some men who had made this magazine that was like quite um, rude, and at the time it was sort of looked upon with a lot of quite disgust and ended up being pretty jarring, and the public reacted quite badly to it. And the case was really famous because the judge was very conservative and absolutely hated this magazine. So it really kind of rocked the world in the UK. Anyway, so that really sparked my interest in the law. That was a great subject. And then the other two Bretts that I did was one was Food for a Healthy Planet, and the other one was called Wellbeing, Motivation and Performance. And I did psychology in high school and I loved it. So I was glad to have the opportunity to do the wellbeing subject and learn a lot about mindfulness and just learn tips that you need every day, even if you're not going to be a psychologist. I think it's just a great subject to learn about the idea of positive psychology and how you can apply that to your own life. So I thought that was a really great subject and really kind of balanced out the rest of my majors.
It's funny. I actually did that well-being, motivation, and performance subject as well, and I came from like a commerce degree, so it's nice that like in those breadth or those like fun electives, the class is made up of arts people, science people, commerce people. You get everyone.
Exactly. And you get to meet people that way as well. And because you do obviously meet, you make friends in your regular classes, but then it's a good way to just sort of connect to people who have different experience than you're having.
Absolutely. Okay, so there's this thing where arts degrees typically get a bad rap. Why do you think that is? And so, how can students really make the most out of their arts degree?
This is a really good question. I think that arts degrees get a bad rap because people think that it's just kind of a waste of time and you're not really going to get any actual job outcomes at the end of it. This is quite funny, but I always think about one of the bathrooms at Melbourne Uni. In the kind of paper towel dispenser, someone would just wrote like arts degrees, like as in you just pull the paper towel, like that's how easy it is to get. I always think about that. Anyway, but I think that I mean, for me, I chose an arts degree because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where I was going to go, and it was kind of like coming out of school, I knew that my interests were in languages and English lit and theatre. So I was like, you know what? I mean, I don't really know where I'm going to go in my next step. The reality was for me is that I knew that I was going to do some kind of postgraduate work, a study, um, and I wasn't necessarily looking to do a degree and then be catapulted into a job straight afterwards. So I kind of was happy to take the subject, sorry, to take the arts degree and just help me figure out what it was that I enjoyed. And obviously I did, and I never would have come to the law had I not done my arts degree. And I think that they always say this, and you don't realize it's true until you've left, but you gain these skills in your arts degree. They always say you gain skills in like critical thinking, and I think particularly for someone who's interested in the law, it's really important that you're always being critical about what you're reading. And for example, if you're reading judgments in the court, it's important to really think quite a lot about what the judges are saying and so on. So I think that that really primed me to be able to come to law school and have that sort of critical mindset and really think rather than just and be able to articulate what I thought about a particular topic really well. So I think that overall my arts degree, the I mean, Chinese is obviously majoring in Chinese is obviously one thing. That's a practical skill, but I think the lit side of my degree was just really helped me to write really well and be a really good communicator. And I think in every job or many jobs, that is one of the most important skills. So I think if you're someone who's not really sure about what you might want to do in the future, I think it's a great place to start, and it's a great place to help figure out what you enjoy and what you want to do.
Most definitely. So, for any student listening here who may be told, don't do an arts degree, if you are not sure what you want to do, or if you want some time to explore, or you want some time to build on different skills, whether that be a language or critical thinking, definitely don't knock an arts degree.
Yeah,
And it's a really
definitely.
great stepping stone to further study, which we are going to chat about now. But
Yeah,
for example, Sabine went into like law school. You can go into like masters of teaching. You could go
yeah,
into masters of public health or policy, for example. So many
exactly.
options.
Yeah, there's so many options. Yeah, I agree.
And so, what is the point? Can you pinpoint when you decided, yep, I'm going to apply for law school and I'm going to continue study at a postgrad level?
Yeah, so like I said, obviously I did two Brett subjects that were really of interest to me. And but I guess the main pinpoint, the point where I realized that that was the switch for me, I suppose, was when I had a friend visiting, or she was an exchange student from Canada, and she and I shared a class together, an English lit class together, and she was about to finish her degree in Canada and then was going to go on to go to law school the following year. And I remember sitting to her, talking to her and thinking like, oh, it's an interesting sort of choice to go down that path because even though I'd done the Brett subject already, I wasn't necessarily convinced by going down that path. And she just talked about her experience in applying for law school and why she wanted to do it. And for me to see someone who was doing my degree, that is an English literature degree, and then going on to do law school and hearing her talk about why she thought it was a good pathway was really helpful, and it just sort of helped me see myself in that position and understand why my degree and my background was going to be useful for me as a potential law student. So she definitely really motivated me to think about going to law school. And then when I started to explore the options at going to law school in Melbourne, I realized that it was something that I was really interested in. And I think building on that, the breadth subjects that I had, I sort of thought, yeah, this is something that I can see myself doing. And it seems, as I said, I was looking for a postgraduate option. And I thought this was a really good option for me.
That's incredible. And so from there, I understand that the process to apply to get into law school can be quite demanding. So tell me, did you need like really high marks in your undergrad? Did you have to sit a test?
Yep. So I'm just going to speak from my experience because I know that COVID changed some things. But I think this is what the uni generally does. They had to, when I applied, they were looking at your WAM and or your weighted average mark and your uh, LSAT score. So the LSAT stands for Law Standardized Assessment Test. I can't even remember. Everyone just says LSAT.
Something
Yeah,
like that.
it's similar to what medical students take, that they have to take in order to get into med school. Basically, it's a global test that all law students take to get into law school. Now, I think Melbourne Uni, perhaps some other unis across Australia, were at the time was the only uni that actually require you to sit the LSAT. And I think that's because Melbourne Uni is in the top 10 law schools in the world, the law school, and therefore they're trying to put themselves on the same level as some of the big schools in America and so on. So I think taking the LSAT was uh, I mean, it was challenging, but I do think that it was an important part of my admission. They never tell you, oh, you need like at least a 75 average mark and you need this score in your LSAT. They never give you like a prescribed number, which is a little bit frustrating because then you just have to do the best you can and hope that you'll get in. But what's sort of good about it is that you apply. I had to apply for law school in about August of the year before. Oh, sorry, maybe I applied before that, but I found out in August whether or not I was going to be accepted or not. And if you don't get accepted on the first instance, there's still an opportunity to take the LSAT afterwards. So you can actually try and take the LSAT, make your score a little bit better, and submit your application again. And if you get a better score, then you might have a chance of getting accepted again. So I had actually already been accepted into law school in August, and at that point, I'd taken the LSAT twice. You can take it a total of 3 times. There's all these rules. You have to pay for it. There's all these you have to make sure you subscribe by the particular deadline or whatever. But at the time, I got in when it was August, but I had already registered to sit for the October LSAT time slot. And so even though I was already in, I still sat that LSAT because I wanted to give myself the best chance of getting a better score, because the better your score is, the more likely you are to get either a Commonwealth supported place or something called a bursary at Melbourne Law School. Basically, when you go to law school, it's pretty expensive. It costs about $120,000 for the whole 3 years. And a CSP is heavily subsidised, so you don't have to pay I think you pay about a third of that, but those places are really limited. And then in order to help a few more students, they offer something called a bursary. So each person is eligible to receive about $100,000 of a loan from the government, so a help loan they call it. And basically the bursary scholarship covers that extra $20,000, so you don't have to pay anything up front in your degree. So I didn't get a CSP, but I got a bursary, and that meant that I have now just got a help loan, and I use my help loan to pay for my degree, but I didn't have to pay anything up front. So that ended up being, a good option for me. And I think when I did my LSAT in October, it was just for me to improve my chances of getting that bursary place, which I did. So
See, these things like I have no idea about, and I don't think a lot of students do. Like,
yeah.
I assume that you can put your postgrad law studies on your HEX, which I understand you could if you get a CSP place, but
Yeah.
not all students are eligible, or not all students get that place.
Yeah, it's actually very confusing. And I think at Melbourne Uni, the majority of people get a CSP place, a Commonwealth supported place in their undergraduate degree. So I had a Commonwealth supported place in my arts degree, which meant that my fees were quite low. But yeah, it's much less common kind of when you get to some of the postgrad degrees. And I think I don't know if this is entirely true, but I think that it's worth making sure that you have those conversations, whatever you're thinking about postgrad work, just making sure to see what's available to me in terms of financial assistance, because obviously these degrees can be pretty expensive sometimes, and it's important to think about how you're going to manage that and whether or not it's a viable option for you.
Absolutely. And it's as easy as calling up the uni, even if you're not accepted, and just say, hey, what are
Correct.
my options? You might even be surprised. You might even be eligible for a scholarship, or, like you said, like a bursary.
Yeah.
We just don't
Yeah.
know if we don't ask.
Exactly. No, I think, and if you are interested in going to law school is incredibly helpful in helping you work out what's available to you. And I think they're a cohort that is really well supported by the administrative staff. So yeah, I definitely recommend having that chat if you need to.
Now, let's talk about exactly what you learn and how it's structured. So I understand it's a 3-year course. Is that right?
Yeah, it is a 3-year course, but you do have the option of extending your degree either by a semester or a year. That just depends on how you sort of load your subjects.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So tell me, what on earth are you learning in the first year? Do they assume like you've got no knowledge of law at all?
So what's really great about the Juris Doctor degree at Melbourne Uni is that everyone has come from an undergraduate degree, like you, like myself, and you come to the degree and there's no pre-required knowledge at all. So it's
That's so
taught
good.
to you, yeah, it's really good. So it's taught to you like you've never learnt the law before. There are people who've had sometimes a bit of a legal background, so everyone comes in it from a different sort of starting point. But again, it's taught to you like you don't know anything. So I think that's really good. It's essentially uh, how it works is that every law student in Australia is required to take something called the Priestly 11, which is 11 subjects that you must take in order to be a qualified lawyer. So, for example, that includes subjects like contracts, constitutional law, property law, and so on. And there's, like I said, 11 subjects that you must take. So those are kind of spaced across your whole degree. And then in your first year, you come in and at that point, you don't do any electives. It's just the core subject. And I think what's really important about the beginning of your degree, you start and you do a kind of 2-week intensive, which is just a really broad overview of the law, which is really helpful. And then you go in and you do your required subjects for first and second semester. And I think what's really important about your first year of law school is that you are learning how to learn the law, how to write an exam, how to study for exams, how to um, keep up with your lectures. It's different from undergrad in the sense that you really need to be on top of your readings and you really need to be attending every class. And if you miss a class, it's obviously not the end of the world, but it's important that you're kind of getting the most information out of every class. Whereas in undergrad, it's probably a little bit more flexible and a little bit less, fewer contact hours, I would say. So I think that's really important in your first year, just to get a grip of understanding, how you learn the law and for example, how you study for exams and how you're going to write your exams, because those are skills that no matter what undergrad degree you've had, it's going to be new for the first time.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned exams. What are the assessments like? Because I've heard that there are huge like exams that could go
Yeah.
for like hours. Is this true?
Yeah. It definitely is true, sadly. What's interesting about it is that you have different types of exams all kind of and assessments all sort of throughout your degree. So, for example, you have the standard ones. In your first semester, you'll do mid-semester sort of assessment, which is sometimes with a partner, and you're kind of writing a response to what they call a hypothetical question. And then you usually have like a 3-hour exam at the end of the semester. And what's good about law school is that all of your exams are open book, all but
Oh,
one, actually. Yeah,
interesting.
so it's not a rote learning. They're not interested in you memorizing the law. They're interested in you applying the law. So you'll pretty much always have, like I said before, something called a hypothetical question, which is then you have to read the question and apply what you've learned about the law to that question. So it's like that's what you would do as a lawyer, basically. So everything's open book, and that's really great. And everything, you have the option of handwriting, but most people type their exams on your computer. So you go and you sit in this room in law school and everyone types their exams. And then, so that's kind of, that's how it works in that the first semester. But then kind of moving on, you do have some exams that are much longer. Like you'll have in second semester and first year, there's an 8-hour exam for constitutional law,
Oh my
which
goodness.
sounds, it sounds crazy, but and it is crazy. It is pretty tough. But I think how it works is that it's meant to reflect a kind of work day. So sometimes in the law, you might get a partner coming to you at the beginning of the day and saying, "Hey, I need this advice by the end of the day," and you have the day to kind of work on it. So it's meant to be kind of reflective of that and that demand of sort of time pressure. So those can be really long, but as anything, it's just important to pace yourself, and you are allowed to spend the time however you want to. So that can include like, you obviously take a little lunch break and stuff like that, just so you're not going crazy sitting at computers for 8 hours. And then other types of exams they have are take-home exams kind of over the weekend sometimes. Sometimes it's just like you might write an essay or assignment and there's no actual exam requirement for some subjects. What I will say, something that I was a bit shocked by when I got to law school is that they often have 100% exams. So it's just one assessment for the whole semester. Sometimes they give you an option, like they might say, oh, you can do an optional mid-semester test for 30%. And your final exam will be worth 70%. And at the start, I kind of took that option. But then as I got through my degree, I realized that I was pretty good under exam conditions. So I thought it's actually more viable for me to just focus really hard in the kind of swap back period and do the 100% exam. And so it sounds really scary when you start, because in your undergrad you're used to kind of multiple assessments most of the time. But I actually found it to be all right, and it meant that I could really just focus on my learning throughout semester, and then come swap back, just really try and put that all together, and then put it all in the exam.
That's actually crazy. Okay, so on that note, it seems like there is a lot going on. Are you there a lot with contact hours? So, for example, I guess it will differ as first, second, and third year, but what's
Yep.
the time commitment like?
So Your time commitment for your contact hours probably actually isn't that much. It's typically about 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours per subject per week. But then I would say you are at law school quite a lot because when you go to law school, there is a lot of different extracurriculars available to you. And I think that's what makes people sort of be there a bit longer. So, for example, in my degree, I did a lot of competitions at law school, which they run. Um, and they run that all every year, and they're really fun. Like, it's a really fun way to get involved, but that means that you are spending more time at uni, obviously, because you're working in these competitions. So some of the competitions, for example, is you might do something what they call moot court, which is like you essentially get a case and you have to like pretend like you're in a court and you have to argue for your client's point of view. uh, so that's really good, and then you can also get involved in the student societies. I was involved in both the Law Student Societies and another society called the Global Law Students Association, and that meant that I had time commitment there because I was obviously putting in work to make events, host events for students to come and attend. So I think your actual contact hours, subject wise, is pretty reasonable, and I certainly know my friends who did commerce thought it was less than commerce. I would say it's more than arts, but not that much more. Um, and But I think overall, you do spend time at law school. You do have some late nights if you're studying there, for example. But overall, it's definitely not. It's just an adjustment. It's just understanding. Okay, like this is what's expected of me, and you can make it exactly what you want to. You can do as many extracurriculars as you want to, or none at all. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever works for you.
That's so true. And like you said, it's what you make of it. So you can put your hand up for all those societies or
Yeah,
competitions or networking things,
yeah,
or you can just choose to, you know what, go in, do the work, and then that's it. It's
yeah,
completely up to
exactly.
you. And so, like, I've always heard that, like, law school is really competitive, or like, people are always like not sharing answers, not answers, like not sharing notes, or, not very
Mm.
warm. Did you find this? What's your experience like?
I think my experience was that you definitely see the competition sometimes, and sometimes it does feel like it can be a little bit isolating. But for the most part, I found it really quite collegiate. I had was really lucky to get some really good friends at law school who sort of stuck with me through the whole way through my degree, and that meant that I always had someone to rely on. And we certainly didn't have we the friendships that I had was very open and very much about helping each other, and not about, oh, every man for himself kind of. If I help you study, then I'm going to get a worse grade, because that's not how it works. So I think I wasn't really someone who, for example, studied in groups ever before my law degree, but now I mean, throughout my entire law degree, I would always have part of my sort of study, would be group study, because you'd often be working through those hypothetical problems and wanting to know what other people are saying, because sometimes you might miss a certain point of the law that needs to be raised. So it's really helpful to have those conversations. And I think that sometimes people make it worse than it sounds, in terms of like, oh, law school's so competitive, like everyone's just trying to push each other out of the way. But I think, yeah, you're all in it together, you're all trying to do the best you absolutely can, and it's really helpful to have people you can rely on. And I found it really quite supportive in the end. And even if there were times where I felt like, oh gosh, like this is really quite difficult, I don't know if I'm good enough, and everyone else seems like they're better than me, it was just good to have that sort of friendship and support to rely on. That meant that it wasn't really competitive, unless you were doing those competitions that I mentioned, and that was obviously more of the competitive side that law students like. But I think that was all friendly, and it wasn't never felt like toxic in any way.
Oh, good. That is so nice to hear. And so, okay, random question. In comparison to other students who have just done a Bachelor of Law, so just like an undergraduate degree at another university, is there much difference? Or is it like having a postgrad in law, is it more prestigious, or is it easier to find a job?
I definitely don't think it makes a difference really in terms of job seeking. So I have recently done something called clerkships, which is part of a law school. If you are applying for a graduate position at a law firm, you can undergo a process called the clerkship process, which is they're kind of like paid internships where you do a small time, a couple of weeks at a law firm, just to get an understanding of what it might be like to be a lawyer at that firm. And I think, in my experience, when I was clerking at various firms, there were some students from Melbourne Uni, but students from Monash Uni, from Deakin, from all kinds of different unis. And in the end, I sort of when I went to Melbourne Uni, I thought, oh, like this will give me really good job prospects, and I'll have a really good chance to, do really well and get a good job at the end of my degree. But and I think that's true, but I think that it doesn't necessarily make that much of a difference in terms of job prospects. What I will say about the difference between the degree is that if you choose to do an undergrad, for example, a lot of my friends have done a double degree at Monash Uni, so like an arts law, for example, which is obviously an undergraduate degree. I don't think the content that you learn is really that much different. There is a difference in terms of electives, but as I said before, you still have to take those priestly 11 subjects. So everyone is still doing that sort of same subject. But overall, I think the difference between choosing a JD is that a lot of people like myself have come in and weren't really sure in their undergraduate degree what they wanted to do, or perhaps they did an undergraduate degree in science and then completely changed their route and decided to do something different because they thought, at the start when they started their science degree, they thought they would like it, but then didn't really like it as much as they thought they would, and then went on to do law instead. So I think what's really good about the JD is that everyone's come in already with an experience. You're not fresh out of high school. You've got life experience. People also come in who've already worked before. So we do have mature age students, or even students who are just, a couple of years older than you, but maybe have worked already in the profession. So you get a really big range of different people coming from all walks of life, and that just makes your experience really rich, I think. And it just means that you've kind of had that sort of post high school experience already, and not that really affects you in any way, but I thought it was really good because it meant that the people that I was working with were sort of on a similar page to me and had a little bit of life experience before they came to their degree, and it just meant that my experience was really rich, as I said.
Thanks for clarifying and sharing, because that's actually like a really big misconception that not many high school
Yeah,
students know. They always think, oh, this is better or that's better or whatnot. So,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it's good to
Yeah.
talk about it. Now, I want to hear more about the clerkship. So, maybe pick one or two of your experiences. Tell me like what you did, what you learnt.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, in Melbourne, you have the option to do at most three clerkships, and it's a very competitive process, but it's a process that a lot of law students go through. And I think it's, even if you're not someone who is thinking about a career in corporate law, it's a good process to go through to just get an understanding and a taste of what life is like as a lawyer, if you're successful in obtaining clerkship. So I was lucky enough to clerk, like I said, at three firms, and one of the firms that I clerked at is called Baker McKenzie, and it's a global firm, and that is a firm that is I was in the employment team there, and basically my clerkship was a 3-week clerkship, and it was in December last year, so it was kind of virtual, and I had a couple of days in the office as well, but obviously adapting to COVID times. Normally, you would just be in the office like ordinary times. But anyway, so it was a 3-week clerkship. And like I said, I was in the employment team, and it was really great because I got to work closely with everyone in the team, including senior lawyers, junior lawyers. And how it works is that you both have the chance to do work and sort of understand what work you might be doing for various clients. So you might be doing a research task to help write an advice for a client because a client's asking about some employment context, or other things you might be doing is there might be a case going to court, and you might have to draft some documents for court, or look at a sort of, for one example, I had to read hundreds of emails because I was trying to find this one particular point in my clerkship. So that's really reflective of what you would do as a lawyer. Um, and then the other part of clerkships is obviously the kind of social side of it and understanding the culture of the firm. So it's a really great way to meet people at the firm and think about whether it's a good firm for you. And every firm, a corporate firm in Australia, they some of them do sort of similar work, but it is really important to reflect on the culture that you have and the culture that the firm has. And in the end, you are eligible to, if you've clerked at some firms, you're eligible to receive what they call a priority offer for your graduate year at those firms. And if you receive a priority offer, then you can go on and be a grad at that firm, and then eventually a lawyer. And it's it can be like a bit of a stressful time, but I think it's a really good way to just think about what is it exactly that I'm looking for in a workplace? What is it exactly that I'm really quite not necessarily the area of law you want to go into, but it's more like what does it seem like a place that I want to work in? Because you in your graduate year you get to rotate through different teams. And that's part of the whole experience. And at the end of your sort of grad year, you get to settle in a team. That's usually how it works in these at these firms. So, for example, another firm that I clerked at was called Hall and Wilcox, and in that firm, I was in the insurance team, and that was obviously quite a different experience. I was doing a lot more court work, which was really interesting, and just a bit of a different flavour of the culture at that firm. But if I was to go on and accept a grad position at any of the firms I clerked at, I will have the opportunity to to rotate and experience different teams at the firm, and then ultimately choose which is the area that I want to settle in. So, I think it's pretty hard to know which area of law you want to go into at the end of your degree, and until you have that chance to kind of experience what it's like to be a lawyer in that area. I don't know how anyone knows what area of law they want to do. So I think that's a really fantastic way to think about which area of law is going to be for me, which is why the grad year is so fantastic.
And so, what if someone unfortunately misses out on a clerkship? Do they have no chance of getting a grad position, or is it harder,
Yeah.
easier?
No, it's a really good question because the realities is that it's very, like I said before, it's very competitive, and more often than not, people miss out. For example, an illustration in my own circumstances, I applied for clerkships in my second year at uni, and I wasn't successful in obtaining any. And I kind of thought, oh, I wasn't. I mean, I was obviously it was a disappointment, but I wasn't really that bummed because I just thought, well, how am I going to sort of channel my energy now to make myself a better applicant? So I ended up extending my degree. So I ended up doing 3.5 years instead of 3 years, which meant that I could apply for clerkships again in my third year. And I spent a lot of time sort of working my resume and making it better to make myself a better applicant. And then obviously I was successful. But even if I hadn't been successful in obtaining the clerkships the second time around, it's certainly not impossible to get a grad job at a firm if you haven't had a clerkship. I think some firms do what they call go to market, and that means that they open up just like a regular job application and go to market, and that means that you can just apply there. And while the firms that do offer priority offer graduate positions, they usually don't go to market, but there are still plenty of other firms that do go to market and do have that opportunity. So that's one option. Another option is just more generally grad jobs in general. So you don't necessarily have to pursue a legal grad job. You can pursue grad jobs in other areas. So I have a friend, for example, who is a grad at Coles at the moment. She's not in the legal team. She's in a completely different team, but her experiences at law school have really helped her along the way to get that job, to get that. And then additionally, some people go down the kind of court route, and they might become an associate, or they might work as a registrar in the court, which is a really great option as well if you're into being into the court and the kind of that process. And then finally, I would say that a lot of people finish their degree and they go on to do something called practical legal training. So everyone has to do that to become a lawyer. But you go there and it's kind of like almost another semester of uni, because you're having to do all these tasks and assessments that required for you to become a lawyer. And sort of unlike law school where you're learning the really theoretical parts of the law, this is just learning about how to draft contracts, for example, how to draft an advice, more kind of practical guidance to help you become a lawyer. So a lot of people go and do that, and they become a lawyer. And then once you kind of have become a lawyer, you also have the options to apply for jobs as a lawyer rather than applying for jobs as a grad when you are not a lawyer yet. So when you're a grad, you do your practical legal training through your grad year. Whereas if you don't do the grad year, then people just go and do their practical legal training and then apply for jobs as a lawyer.
Oh, wow. Okay. Again, I didn't know this. So you finish
Yeah,
law
very
school
confusing.
or you finish your undergrad in law, and everyone has to do practical legal training, whether that's
Yeah,
in a grad degree or whether that's just
correct.
doing it.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone has to do practical legal training, whether at some point. And yeah, so if you're lucky enough to get a grad role, then you're a lot of firms will sponsor you to do your practical legal training, so they'll pay for you to do it. Whereas other people who don't go into a graduate position, then they just do it yourself. And it's part of, like I said, it's kind of like almost like another semester of uni, because you're in a little cohort and everyone's working kind of like a class together to get that qualification that enables you to become a lawyer in Australia.
Ah, gotcha. And then is that when you get admitted once that's done?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So as soon as you've done that, then you become, you get to be an official lawyer in Australia, and everyone's really excited because you get like your own little stamp, and you and you get to go to the court. Well, in pre-COVID times, you get to go to court, and someone it's a big ceremony. So yeah, it's really good.
Very exciting. Okay, and so let's think back to like high school students. They're thinking of becoming a lawyer. They've just listened to this podcast and they're like, wow, there's so many options. I could do it in so many ways. Why do you think that they should choose to study law at postgrad instead of a bachelor's degree?
Yeah, look, I would just say, as I sort of touched on before, if you're someone who's not really necessarily sure about the law, let's say you have a really strong interest in something at school, like I did, maybe you're interested in psychology, maybe you're interested in history, or English, like me. If you are someone who's like, yeah, look, I'm kind of interested in the law, but I don't really know. And I kind of want to just spend the next couple of years just sort of figuring out, maybe trying a couple of different things, because you never know what's gonna come your way and what might surprise you. So I think for me, I would never have thought about the law at my undergrad sorry, at the end of high school. I never thought it was going to be something that I would do, and it wasn't until I got to my undergrad degree that I thought maybe it's a possible option for me. So if you had kind of have no idea at the moment, if you're thinking about doing law already, then maybe it's a good option to go ahead and do the double degree and do your undergrad law degree. But if you're someone who's like, nah, I'm not really sure, then just follow your passion at the moment. Do your undergrad degree in whatever you want to do, because the realities are, most people, or a lot of people, follow on to do postgrad work and degree. So it's totally fine for you to just follow your passions at the moment, and kind of give yourself a couple of years to figure out whether or not you do want to do the law, or whether or not it's a career for you, or if you find another passion in your undergrad, then follow that. So I just think it's a good your first couple of years after high school and in uni is a great way to understand what you're actually interested in, and really just form some of those critical skills that maybe you've missed out on learning in school, including things like managing your time and yourself and things like that. So I think it's a good chance to just explore your interests in your undergrad, and that's why I'm really glad that I did my undergrad first and then went on to do postgrad law.
Absolutely. Okay, so what are some ways that students can uncover that passion? So like, should they try debating? What kind of work experience should they try find?
Yep. Well, I mean, debating's great. I never really did debating, so I can't speak to that much for it. But I think that if you're sort of interested in the law, it's a good idea, or to sort of understand if you're interested in it. One thing that I'll recommend is a podcast called The Law Report, and they just kind of do, I think it's weekly. They just sort of talk about things that are happening in the law. And if you listen to that podcast, and if you're like, oh my God, this is really interesting, what's happening in this particular area of law. They sometimes talk about cases. They sometimes talk about things that are happening in legislation. If that's something that sparks your interest, then great. You have a sort of hook, and that's something that okay, this is actually something that I'm probably pretty interested in. And then if you want to know what it's like to be a lawyer, then yeah, get out there and have conversations. Whether that's talking to someone at law school, whether that's someone who's in their profession already, as much as you can. I always recommend just, it never hurts to have a conversation with someone to see what they're doing. And at the worst, you talk to them and you think, oh God, I would never want to do that. Or yeah, actually that's something that I'm really sort of keen on. So I think I was lucky enough to uh, meet with some barristers in my law degree, and sort of that was a way for me to understand, what does a barrister do on a day-to-day basis? Is that something that I would be interested in? And those conversations just help shape my sort of interest in thinking about what I might do with my career. So it's always good to have conversations with people. It's always good to reach out and just say, can we have a chat? Like people always want to have a coffee. It's always kind of quite easy to find out about that. But I would say, yeah, if you have an interest, if you listen to podcasts like the Law Report and you're like, yeah, this actually sounds like the subject matter is interesting to me, I think this could be a good place to sort of be in the world, then chances are, you're going to have that interest and you're going to be able to go on and study it and enjoy it, and then find out more by meeting people about potential career options.
Some great advice. And what about, now I ask everyone this to conclude the episode, what's something that you wish you knew when you were in year 11 and year 12? And it can be about anything, it doesn't have to be about law. What would you go back and tell your younger self?
I think one thing that I was reflecting on when I was thinking about this question was that everyone sort of says to you when you're in high school, like, oh, like you're about to start the real world now. Now you've finished school, like everything gets harder from now on because you're on your own. And I found that really frustrating because it sort of set you up for failure before you already began, your uni sort of days or whatever it might look like after high school. So I think what I would wish I knew when I was in year 11 and 12 is that there's time for you to figure out your passions. There's time for you to explore what you're interested in, and some things you're going to try and you think you're going to really love it, and you might not like it. There are other things that you're going to be surprised that you're interested in. Like I said, over my dead body that I think I was going to be a lawyer in year 11 and 12, but then I through my undergrad degree, it really opened lots of doors for me, and it really gave me the opportunity to be exposed to areas of working and careers that I wouldn't otherwise have thought of. So just give yourself that opportunity to soak up as much as you can, be a sponge, and sort of take in as much information as you can, and think about what might be good for you, but be flexible in that sense. Like, don't worry about, oh my God, I have to have a job right out of high school or right after my first degree. It's totally fine. We're going to have something like, I think the statistic is that we have like 5 careers in our lifetime now. So, it's fine for you to start somewhere and then change, or have an interest in one area and then change that interest. And it's just like, let's just try and enjoy the time that we have, rather than rushing to think we have to have a certain job by this age or by this point in our lives.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I feel like there's so much pressure, or there's like a bit of a hurry in high school to know exactly what you want to do.
Yeah, but and it's tiring.
Yeah, you don't need to know. But that was very insightful, just everything about your journey and, your pathway to law, which happened to be not planned out from high school anyway. So it was very, very insightful. Thank you so much, Sabine.
No worries at all. Glad to chat.
Now, if any student has any more questions, maybe about arts or even like law at Melbourne, I will get them to reach out. So I'll pop your LinkedIn in the show notes as well. And Sabine will be happy to answer any of your questions.
Absolutely. Always happy to have a chat.
If you like this episode of The Student Space, you can find us on Instagram at the.studentspace, and it's just The Student Space on Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, if you have any requests for podcast episodes in the future, do reach out to us on Instagram DM and I'll make that happen. If you'd like to support us further, follow us on Spotify or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Alternatively, I would love for you to leave a review. Thanks everyone. Bye.